So, welcome to this event. I'm really happy to have all of you here. It's a long time that we are organizing this event, so it's really nice to finally have all of you here with us. I'm sorry for the weather, well, I hope it will get better. You never know. Here in Brussels, you can see the 4 seasons in one day, so it might come the sun later. Just a few words before starting. First of all, my name is Gabriele Sacchettini. I represent the RISE Foundation, which is a think tank based here in Brussels, which is dealing with agro-environmental policy at European level. Okay? This event is organized by the RISE Foundation in the frame of the European project BestMap, in collaboration with the other 2 European projects, AgriCore, MindStep, and under the umbrella of the Forum for Agriculture initiative. I will be moderating these events together with Emma Mikos, which is the Deputy and Program Director of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. You will meet her later because she will moderate the second part of this session. Okay? So we are going to talk about biodiversity, ecosystem services, and the role of the Common Agricultural Policy to address the losses. Okay? And we will try to understand how it could be improved and what kind of scientific evidence the European project can bring into our discussion. Okay? To do that, as I mentioned, we will have a presentation of 3 different Horizon projects, and then after we are going to have a stakeholder panel discussion. The idea is to share with you the result of the scientific research, but also to have the opportunity to discuss about it, because the stakeholder engagement and social acceptance is very important, okay? Just technical information, this event is recorded by the audio, okay? And also we are going to take some pictures. If any of you is, let's say, not happy about that, just let us know. Also, everything will be in English. There will not be translation, unfortunately, and I hope this is not going to be a problem. And also you can find here some link at the social network of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. It would be nice if you can post making the hashtag and link to these, let's say, social networks, so we can repost it. I mean, they can repost it, and we can, let's say, disseminate more the outcomes of these events, okay? So the first speech will be, I will invite in the floor Tassos Aniotis. He's the keynote speaker that will talk about the analytical tool, okay, and the role to understand, to help the policy decision making. So I invite Tassos here. Tassos Aniotis, just a few words, is a special advisor for sustainable productivity at the Forum for the Future of Agriculture, is senior guest researcher scholar at the IICA, and former director of strategy simplification and policies analysis in DG Agri. So, Tassos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. This is how I look today. This is how I looked 12 years ago. I don't know where they picked up this picture. Was circulating somewhere. I've given them a more recent one. It's like it's good, despite the weather, actually, to be back in a different capacity, in different shoes than the ones that most of you know me. And I would like to stress more the fact that by training, I was, throughout my career in the Commission, remained, and after my retirement from the Commission, also remained an ag economist. An ag economist specialized in agricultural trade policy. That was my PhD, and actually having seen many ups and downs in the formation of the Common Agricultural Policy, and not only the Common Agricultural Policy. I used to be also an expert in US foreign policies, and you always remain an expert in US foreign policies because no matter what happens, it's counter-cyclical and nothing really changes. But what I'm going to focus to you today is something that reflects my experience in being squeezed, if you want, between public administration that was responsible for policy making, and also the background that I brought and I updated as an ag economist that dirtied my hands with data and modeling analysis also at a significant part of my career. And a lot of it has to do with personal experience. Half of my life has been in the Commission, so I cannot just drop it, but what I will express is clearly and strictly personal. And I would like to start with something, one of the things that I learned in my career in the Commission is you better prepare your PowerPoint the last moment. And I did this morning, because you never know whether the sun will come out and how it's going to look. It's a new world out there. When I first used that, the new world had other type of characteristics. Now it has a new one. For the first time, there is an abandonment of one of the flagships of the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. And I think this is something that relates very much to many of the things I'm going to say, that have to do with the fact that we have reached a level where the debate is so polarized, so no matter what happens, it's going to be a dark day. It's going to be a dark day. If we change something, it's going to be a dark day if you don't change something. But to be able more calmly to see what we have to do and how we reached the level we have reached and what we can do in the future, we need to take a look at what these characteristics of this world is. And what I've seen, especially during and immediately after the COVID debate, it's rare to find a day that there is a reference, there is no reference in agriculture, and it's always going to be negative. Always going to be negative because it depends on the side that you take. Before COVID, the food systems were a catastrophe and broken. Then it was the only system that survived the crisis in the COVID. So after all, it's not that broken, but in need of repair. And of course, it is in need of repair. And then came the war in Ukraine. Now we have another war as well. And what happens is that polarized the debate between food security and climate change. We tended to forget that there is a continent out there that is growing with 2.4% annual rate of population and with 0.5% maximum productivity. And food security is not a European problem. There is no such thing as we don't have a food security problem in Europe, because it's a global problem for the same reason that climate change is a global problem. And instead of addressing those in parallel and in tandem, we tended to use one as a pretext against the other. And there is a tendency in the modern world to actually turn everything into black and white and consider that things that are usually complements, they turn to become substitutes. And increasingly what we had is a combination of accumulated frustration that blew up, and that is, when you have farmers complaining in different member states with very, very different, by the way, demands. If you look at what they're saying, I was in Greece 2 days ago. In Greece, sometimes the debates reminded me of things that we did in 2004 and have yet to be implemented. The debate in France is different than the debate in Poland or the debate in Germany. But you have this frustration that, in my view, is linked to the fact that agriculture has been at the forefront of a debate that has been very poorly structured on climate change action. Farming is still asked to do all sorts of things for other policies, whether it's environmental, climate, industrial adjustment, and emissions from there. Biofuels. Agriculture has always been linked with the production of food, feed, fuel, and fiber. Now, how much of that is going to be food depends on how much is going to be the other three elements, because there is so much land available. And if you only look at the pressure that we're having on fuel and actually using more part of the land to solve the problem of other sectors in this green transition, then one thing that pops in mind immediately in all the debates I had, I heard something in Greece the other day, and we need to capture carbon from the air and put it in the soil. And my response was, but isn't this what agriculture is doing? But when you look at every side that talks about emissions, then you see an asterisk in agriculture, excluding carbon. sequestration. And that's exactly the what should have been our starting point. How much carbon do we sequester with current practices? And how can we improve these practices to actually move further and do a better job? And that's my experience, a recent experience in also being in the 2 advisory boards of research, big research projects of Horizon. When you look at economic models, we have incorporated with weaknesses environmental aspects. I remember in Agri-Outlook years ago, we did scenarios on different climate change parameters and what would happen if some best practices were applied in all the European Union. You don't have all the data that is necessary, but you do have some data. The problem I see is that geophysical models that has an extreme wealth of information don't have the economy in there. So whether prices are through the roof or under the floor, a practice is the same, while in reality a practice is not the same because it's very much dependent on the market environment you're going to face. So the question now is, have we reached a turning point? We can say yes and no. There is still a need, of course, to address in tandem these long-term challenges of climate change and food security. And I don't think there is a need to convince anybody that there is climate change or there is a food security problem. Everybody knows that. What there is a need is try to find ways where we put the debate back on track and on solid ground. And for those of you that look at LinkedIn, I put an article, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, on the need to have a credible baseline. And that's where the title, which a new world out there was coming from. Because all the fundamental assumptions that we made when we made the Paris Agreement are not holding anymore. And if we really want to achieve the targets we have set, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, were all the targets realistically set or not? My feeling has always been no. There is a tendency out there to set targets by repeating the same number all over the place. I still remember in a soil management big international conference, one scientist saying, if we get half of what we ask for, we're very happy. And that was the beginning phrase of another article I wrote on why some aspirational targets fail to inspire. What appeared as a great success for some people becomes a policy failure for others, because people don't realize how we end up with a 50% target, how we come up with a 30% target on food waste that keeps repeated, while more analysis has indicated that this is much lower. You still need to do a lot on food waste, but you better know how much food waste is and where it is before you do anything else. So obviously, there are several issues that need to be addressed. Obviously, none of them, I'm not going to provide solutions to all of them, but with another slide, I will try to focus more on what is the present exercise, if you want, which brings together academics and researchers with a different Brussels bubble type of audience, and there is a need to find some common language. So some personal thoughts on the policy design and the CAP analytical tools. First of all, it's about data, and rightly so, you put in the title of the event, the data-linked evidence. And about data, there is simply too much information out there, and people are being lost not only about what numbers to use, but what is the causality of these numbers. So we have to have a prioritization of the type of information we use. When it comes to the basic economic data, for years, we pretty much are capable of understanding the supply side of the agricultural production with weaknesses on the environmental footprint, but these have become less and less recently. But when it comes to the food chain, this is a black box. And in this need for a new baseline article I put on LinkedIn, I just put a graph which is based on FAO data that shows the producer price ups and downs of the last 25, 30 years, and what happens at food inflation. We've never had the degree of food inflation we have today, despite the fact that we had commodity booms and busts and agricultural price spikes in the past. Never. which shows and indicates that there is something there in the food chain that is not working in a transparent way. And if I knew what exactly it is, I would have provided some hints. But when you try to find data about what is happening in the food chain, and I saw you have behavior aspects in some of your models, here is what I told a CEO, he's not a CEO anymore, of a big supermarket company in Europe some years ago, more than 10 years ago, and I repeated it 2 other times I saw him. When it comes to agricultural models, we assume that farmers respond to the prices of last year. And that's a correct assumption. Not only their own prices, but cross prices. When it comes to consumer demand, we assume the same price. And we know this is wrong. Can you give us aggregated data of consumer behavior in supermarkets on Fridays and Saturdays, where you do your big discounts, on 15 basic commodities, so at least we can update our elasticities when we do our models. I and my colleagues after me are still waiting for the answer. So, and then on the environmental data, there is a need for, first of all, collection, because not everybody is doing their job, but also harmonization, especially a lot of information on the fork side, I just mentioned it. And when I talk about harmonization in this carbon farming, if you ask, most of it as private initiatives. Some companies are doing a very good job, others are not. But when you ask them, are your methodologies harmonized? The answer, of course, is no. And when you ask them, do you control where you get, sometimes you get a smile. And it cannot go like that. And it's not only what the private sector is doing, because they're doing pretty good things, is what in the public sector we have been doing. So it's also about the use of data. The first thing you learn about the model is a gross representation, rough representation of reality. That's not a bad thing, and it's a necessary thing. Models should not become too complex, because you lose track of what we're trying to explain. But what needs to change is the manner by which models communicate to each other and the manner by which modelers communicate to the non-modelers. And a test is actually this audience, in my view, today. And we have to do it by starting with the basic assumptions. It's not possible to have geophysical models and economic models where even the basic assumptions are different. I mean, energy plays a role in agriculture in many, many different ways. At least you better know what is in energy there and what price is there. Is the price of oil that is less and less important? It's the price of natural gas. And natural gas in the US and Europe is not the same. It has implications on fertilizers, and that has implications on best practices and what we do about them. So the biophysical models need to get the economy in their structure, and the economic models need to better prioritize and what we have on the environment. And finally, it's about a narrative of data. What story do we tell? And is this story a fairy tale for bedtime reading to children, which is a good thing to make them more sensitive on the world out there? Or does it go some steps further, which is necessary to actually focus on what is the basic need? And here is a very personal bias, which is not new, actually. I first raised this issue when I was still in the Commission. There is a huge potential out there to increase productivity sustainably. And that means to shift the marginal cost curve to the right for those that are economists, to reduce the cost of producing without hurting the environment. And in fact, to do it by improving the environment. There are plenty of practices, from organic farming to agroecology to conventional precision farming, that demonstrate this. What I have seen is an allergic reaction in certain quarters to the use of the word productivity. Productivity is an output to input ratio. What goes in output and what goes in input matters, but does not mean that productivity is productivism. And it does not mean that we have to repeat all the mistakes of the 60s and 70s with all the economic growth and social gains that were at the expense of the environment. We can do it together. And it's not possible, in my view, to move further by saying, here is how you actually reduce the impact to the environment and how you have a more just and safe operating space at planetary basis, but there's going to be a huge social cost. with a huge social cost, you don't get people on board. You have to show that you can do it with a minimum social cost. Those that have to pay a greater price could pay a better price, but there has to be some comfort for people that see inflation on food, inflation on energy higher, increasing their production costs, and we need to give answers to that. And exactly this is where I find the importance of meetings like this. Because there are examples out there, and you have them, and you're going to present them, that demonstrate that this is feasible. But where we have failed pretty badly is to be able to communicate these examples, and therefore had the debate based on evidence instead of an exchange of slogans. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tassos. I think, the presentation was interesting. I'm sure you have many questions for him, but we don't have time now for the question for him, also because he will join the stakeholder panel